2024 was a whirlwind of adjusting to life with 8 kids. We welcomed a sweet baby boy to our family, and I quickly had to try and remember how to balance a newborn with homesteading life. I had obviously done it several times before, but not only had it been quite a few years, since my youngest two are 5 years apart, but also because life is so much different now. Our other kids are older. I work from home way more than I did as a young mom. We are thick into homeschooling our older kids now. I even had to make peace with the fact that I now have a driving teen, so often I was juggling the exhaustion of a newborn with staying awake to make sure my teenager made it home by curfew. I even decided to launch basically an entire new business. 2024 was a lot. But as you may have guessed by the title of this video, 2025 is going to be just as full and exciting as we are expecting baby number 9 in July. We had hoped for a close in age sibling for our youngest, and we feel so blessed by this news, even if it was a little shocking and also a bit nerve-wracking as I try to wrap my mind around adding another baby to the mix. These babies will be about 18 months apart, so definitely not our closest by a long shot. Our closest are 12 and a half months apart, but it's been a while and I'm getting older. One thing that was really weird with this pregnancy is that I had 0 symptoms aside from being exhausted for the first 9-ish weeks. Then the nausea hit and the exhaustion and just plain lack of motivation have been really rough as well. I do have one possible explanation for this, and that is because I was nursing my now 1-year-old, and at about that time I lost my milk supply and ended up weaning him. I have heard that nursing can keep first trimester symptoms at bay, so if it's possible for you, keep nursing. Now, I do want to say I have it very easy compared to many. I have friends who are puking their entire pregnancy, and I don't think I've actually ever puked. Just that nagging nausea that makes you feel terrible, but it isn't life-altering, so please keep that in mind if you're getting morning sickness worse than I do. I do think, though, as someone who has gone through the first trimester 9 times now, I do have a few words of advice or ideas to help you if you too are trying to juggle pregnancy and homemaking or homesteading. So I'm going to share a few of those today with you as I go about some homemaking tasks. Please know that none of this is medical advice, just simply things that have worked for me, so please listen to your body and your care provider. First, I have found that staying in motion and staying busy, as counterintuitive as that sounds, helps a ton. In fact, as I think back to my first pregnancy, I worked at that time and I would always get terribly sick right at the time I was done with work around noon. I thought it was just good luck at the time, but now I wonder if it was actually sitting down and putting more attention on how I felt that made things feel worse. Now, like I said, this isn't helpful for someone with extreme morning sickness, but I'd say the majority of people might benefit from staying busy. Also, even with my energy level, I do so much better when I'm up and productive all day. It's when I sit down or try to take a break that my energy just drops. Alongside this advice, though, I'd say it's also important to prioritize sleep, whatever that looks like for you in the season that you're in. I don't nap well, so for me, it means that instead of staying up late to work after the kids are in bed, I get right to sleep, and at least for that first trimester, I didn't let myself feel guilty for sleeping as late in the morning as possible. My baby still gets up at night, so sleep is precious. As far as homemaking and homesteading chores, you guys, unless you're new here, know how much I love routines and planners and schedules, but I have found that the first trimester is not the season for these things. Instead, I operate more on the fly. I focus each day on just getting the basics accomplished, like feeding the kids and maybe a load of laundry, and then if I happen to have a burst of energy, I'll tackle a project. And often I like to focus my attention on projects that my future self will thank me for, like prepping food. I try to plan out my meals and get ingredients and recipes organized in my pantry to help with this. I have found that if I don't have dinner at least prepped by noon, it is very difficult for me to get something together, so the slow cooker has been a favorite tool to accomplish this. One project I put off much longer than ever before was processing these tomatoes. I always freeze a bunch of tomatoes in the fall to be made into sauce, but I've definitely never waited until December to deal with them. But taking the pressure off and lowering your expectations just makes life during this time more enjoyable. And just know that you will feel like yourself again someday, so just give yourself grace. I use a sauce maker to make processing these tomatoes very easy, But I was taking my own advice here, and by the time I was done making the sauce, I didn't have any energy left to finish the project. I think it was late at the time, so I just poured it all into containers and placed them on my porch to freeze until I could muster up the energy to do the next step, which was actually a week or two later. Thawing it all out was a bigger pain than I anticipated, but it was nice being able to pour off some of the water so that it would boil down and thicken quicker. As my sauce thickened, I could combine it all into one pot, and then I let it simmer just a bit longer until it was the consistency I wanted for my marinara sauce. Most of this got canned as marinara, since I still had plenty of plain sauce in the cellar from last year. I have been tweaking this recipe for a few years, and my husband said I nailed it this time, so I'll go ahead and share the recipe. I start by separating out 2.5 gallons of plain thickened tomato sauce into a large pot. Then I rough chop 5 large onions, mince 4 garlic cloves, and then saute them over medium heat until the onions are beginning to caramelize. I then run the onions and garlic through my blender until the mixture is fairly smooth before adding it into the pot of tomato sauce. Then I add a half cup plus 2 tablespoons of salt, 1 cup of sugar, a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of basil, a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of oregano, 3 tablespoons of Italian seasoning, 1 tablespoon of red pepper flakes, 3 teaspoons garlic powder, and 5 bay leaves crumbled fine. Next, I let that simmer for about 45 minutes, stirring often to keep it from burning on the bottom. You can freeze this, but I prefer to can it so that it is shelf stable. To each quart, I add a 1/2 teaspoon citric acid, pine skit a 1/4 teaspoon, and this is just to ensure that my recipe is acidic enough to be safely water bath canned. Then fill your jars, wipe the rims, and add your lids and rings. Quart jars are processed in a water bath canner for 40 minutes and pints for 35. And if you're like me and live above 1,000 feet in elevation, you should add 5 minutes to those times. We eat this sauce on noodles for spaghetti or as a dip. This is also amazing pizza sauce. So for pizza sauce, I just take a pint jar and add in some tomato paste to thicken it. One thing that I get better and better at with each pregnancy is learning to simplify my home so that it can't get ahead of me when my energy is low. My little girl's room was one area that I was feeling super overwhelmed by, and frankly, so were they. I kept threatening to throw everything away if they wouldn't clean it, and then they'd say, "Go ahead, do it." So finally, I decided that they were craving a simpler space just as much as I was, and went for it. Now, I didn't get rid of their most precious keepsakes or their brand new things from Christmas, but I was able to get rid of, I'd say, about 80% of the things in their room, and they were thrilled. They finally could enjoy their space again, and I felt a weight lifted off of my shoulders. It was a win-win. Another area where we have taken this approach is with toys in general. I have actually taken almost all of my kids' toys, aside from a few specific things like the dollhouse in the girls' room, and organized them into one large lockable closet. They honestly don't ask for stuff out of there very often, but it has made my job so much easier because I'm no longer fighting the never-ending battle of asking the kids to clean up toys, and keeping toys out of the bedrooms is a game changer. If you aren't sure, you don't have to go throwing everything away quite yet. Just put them in bins where kids can't get to the toys on their own and see what you think. As far as specific products or foods or hacks to get rid of nausea, I really like these candied ginger chews, and for whatever reason, the smell of lemon is something that calms my nausea really well. Both this pregnancy and my last have been my easiest first trimester, and I'm thinking this supplement drink that I take daily might help as well. It's a gut and mental health supplement, so it helps with energy and includes pre and probiotics. I also add in this electrolyte powder. Oh, and I discovered last pregnancy that a liquid prenatal and liquid iron not only doesn't upset my stomach as much, but it is also way more effective. It was the only way I was able to get my iron up last time, so I'm definitely taking those again. I'll link all of these supplements below. But I think the biggest thing for me is just eating small protein-packed meals throughout the day and not letting myself get hungry. When I get hungry is when I get sick, and then it seems at that point if I try to eat, it usually gets worse before I get better. But if I can just stay on top of eating every few hours, I can almost completely avoid the extreme nausea. This all fits really well with my diet since my last pregnancy, as I have been following the brewer's diet since learning about blood volume and how you need to eat in order to account for that change in blood volume with pregnancy. I could probably do a whole video on that, but if you're pregnant or plan to be, definitely look up the brewer diet. It is known to decrease morning sickness as well as prevent some serious complications such as preeclampsia. One food that I have been told is really good for morning sickness is beans. I believe it is their high levels of vitamin B6 that contribute to this, but I will say that at my worst, I did find fake cookie dough made out of beans to be something I craved. Actually, I still crave it, and this stuff tastes amazing. I got this from a company called Hungryroot, which I'll link below, but on this day I thought I'd give making my own a try, so I'll take you along for that. All I did was add to my food processor a can of rinsed northern beans, a couple scoops of peanut butter. I think this ended up being about a half a cup, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. You could also do another sweetener of your choice, and then about a teaspoon of vanilla. And then I blended that well until it was nice and smooth in my food processor. Then I added in some chocolate chips and chilled the concoction. It turned out great, and I will probably be making this a lot more because, well, healthy-ish cookie dough. How can you not? Other ways to get beans in are as refried beans or bean salad, which I've been loving lately. I know a newly pregnant mama who got a lot of relief from the bean trick, and she would just sit down and eat a jar of canned pinto beans. So whatever sounds good to you. Finally, my last piece of advice is to ask for help. I now have big kids, and for me, asking for help looks like asking my family to do their part and not leave the work to me. But if you are in those years of only littles, ask if a friend can take your kids or family member for an afternoon while you take a nap or get some of those simplifying projects done. It's hard to do, but always worth it. And hopefully then that friend or family member will feel more comfortable asking you for help in the future as well. I'm sure I'm forgetting things that have helped, but I think it would be really fun if you guys left in the comments things that have helped you either deal with morning sickness or juggle the struggles of the first trimester with life or caring for kids. I think that this would be really helpful for others as well. Next week, I'm kicking off my 2025 Ditch the Grocery Store Challenge, where I'm going to help you make the swap from store-bought to homemade one item at a time. So make sure to turn on your notifications so that you don't miss those videos. Have a wonderful weekend, friends.